Hello BookTube, I have returned. Things have been a bit chaotic recently, but I've still been reading even if I haven't been recording anything. So I didn't want to keep my 2 subscribers waiting too long. So thanks both of you for subscribing, by the way. So continuing with June on the Range, I have read another Elmore Leonard novel, Last Stand at Saber River. So this is the story of Paul Cable, a Confederate cavalryman who fought under the infamous Nathan Bedford Forrest, and it makes quite a big deal about having done so, and it's quite relevant to what he does in the book. So you might know him as the kind of blitzkrieging Southern general, or later the Grand Wizard of the KKK. So it was a bit jarring at first hearing him referred to so effusively in the book, but you know that's you get what you get in a western. But our man Paul has returned with the war still ongoing to Arizona, back to his farm with his family, who had kind of decamped to Texas during the conflict. He returns only to find that his former homestead is in the de facto possession of two brothers, Vern and Dwayne Kidson, who kind of work as horse dealers and traders and breakers for the Union Army. So, you know, like I was saying, this is kind of the first part of the book that was kind of a bit hard to overcome. That we were supposed to be sympathetic with the returning Confederate and kind of despise the two Union men. But again, Elmer Leonard is kind of too good a writer just to, well, first of all, he's good enough a writer that he can kind of get past that kind of thing. But also, he makes it a bit more complex. There's a bit more going on, and I'll get into all that. So there are there's mutual bonds kind of between Vern and Cable, you know, and similar to in Valdez's Coming, the protagonist and the antagonist can see another time and place where they would have fought side by side, or been comrades in arms, or even friends and neighbours. But I'm kind of getting ahead of myself there. There's a third, far darker character in the book as well. The two primary ones are Paul Cable. Well, yeah, I suppose the main ones are kind of Paul Cable and even among the Kidson brothers, it's mainly Vern is the primary figure. Dwayne is a much kind of lesser part of the partnership. But the other character is far darker, and that's Edward Janro, kind of an insane, one-armed, die-hard Confederate. You know, we learn that he's a kind of a psychopath who's ordered and participated in you know what we would now call kind of a wartime atrocity. So he's been dismissed from the Confederate Army, but has not given up on the cause, and is now operating kind of clandestine in Arizona, which at this point of the war had become a Union territory. But he's working kind of as a gun runner and arms dealer, and he seeks to co-opt Cable first quite directly, saying, you know, well, you're a Confederate, you fought for the Confederacy, I fought for the Confederacy, you are still a soldier at heart, even though he's kind of turned his back on that. And then through subterfuge, well, if he won't directly engage in this work, then he kind of sets about a series of events in motion, which with the Janro's purpose of these events is to force Cable's hand to act in such a way that would benefit Janro as he sees it in his own kind of warped mind. But this is not really a story about men. Kind of after I reflected on the book a bit, it's actually about family. Now, probably the most endearing part of Paul Cable is the mutual love and respect between Cable and his quite formidable wife, Martha Cable. and the love that they have for their children. It's, it is a really, really strong family. It's when Cable tries to get the homestead off the men, and succeeds for a while. Um, the Kidson brothers, or some of their kind of henchmen, realize that a man with this attachment to his family and with this family surrounding him, who is not going to go without a fight. He's not going to flee. He's not going to run away. He's actually become quite a dangerous man. But that's not the only family bond. In fact, family bonds kind of run throughout this story. There's also the Kidson family, as I mentioned, the two brothers, Vern, who's almost a mirror of Paul, and Dwayne, who is this disgraced Union officer, but still puts on like the airs of a kind of a great military man, and is kind of slightly made fun of for doing this. And there's also Dwayne's daughter, Lorraine. So she is quite different. So after kind of a transient urban life with her mother, she comes back to live with her father after her mother dies. So she's gone from drawing rooms and kind of moving from city to city to now being basically in the middle of nowhere as far as she's concerned. She's at heart, even though she's 18, she's still quite immature, quite a girl, and quite a spoiled, self-centered one at that. She sees the whole conflict that's going on between Cable and her father and her brother, her father and her uncle, as kind of a bit of a game, something to kind of pass the time. And she toys with Cable quite a bit, for pure devilment as it goes on. But as the story becomes more, as the tension kind of rises and the story becomes more gritty and blood filled, she kind of disappears into the background, and I think pretty much is gone for the final third of the novel. The third family is so Kidson, or not Kidson, but Jansen, or Jan Rowe is operating out of kind of a general store in the area, and Luz is kind of living with him as a servant, and she's been kind of reluctantly conscripted into his dealings of gun running and smuggling and that kind of stuff. And there's similarly with her brother, has been kind of co-opted into Jan Rowe's scheme. But Luz also loves Vernon Kidson. That's the kind of if Paul Cable and Martha are a kind of mature relationship, then Vern and Luz are kind of at the start of their kind of romantic journey. Pretty much severed all ties at the start, when Cable returns. But what I found is kind of, as the story progresses, it's the family bonds that are the deepest, or certainly that the ones that have kind of the strongest and most kind of exemplary bonds are the ones that become the heroes and that have the most prominent position in the story, and that's we know by now that the villain is the real villain is the solitary Jan Rowe, who has no family to speak of around him, and is actually quite at best condescending, but also quite threatening towards both Luz and Martha Cable. He's very much the solitary man who is bad. I won't give away the ending, but I will say that similar to Valdez is Coming, it has a very, very good and powerful climax and twist towards the end. It's well worth reading. It has an intelligent, believable ending, which is kind of a lot. Should all books have that, we'd be doing quite well. But yeah, I highly recommend you read this book. You know, if you come across it, again, I bought it on Kindle when it was going for 99 cents. So I only wish I'd bought more Elmore Leonard books when I had the opportunity. So I'll be keeping my eye out on the Amazon deals to see if we can, you know, sweep up a few more there. Um, it's a short novel, about 193 pages on the Kindle, and I did a bit of cursory research on it, and it's quite an early one of Leonard's books, first published in 1959, and while it doesn't quite rise to the high watermark of Valdez is Coming, because that's an excellent Western by all accounts, it is still a strongly engaging story with fast-paced action, great characters, psychological depth, kind of in the backdrop of the American Civil War, but not in a primary place out at the periphery of the conflict. Strong bonds of family, even actually similar to Valdez is Coming, the henchmen, the fellas who drive the cattle or drive the horses for Vern Kidson, they're not interested in this conflict. They are there to drive the horses and make their money, which is a similar argument that came up amongst the henchmen in Valdez is Coming. So was there a bit of something kind of going through both of those books. You can tell this is an earlier book, having read Valdez is Coming beforehand, because there's still quite a lot of fat that could be trimmed. What we learn about the monstrousness of Genro comes from flashbacks, insights into his own mind, but also a dream that's recounted by another character. These kind of things. It's like you probably only needed to do one of those to give us a sense of how much of a villain Genro is. Particularly because none of the other characters, well, the reader is let into his mind, but no one else really knows what's going on. But they all sense this is a dangerous man. The character of Lorraine, again, is probably one of the weaker parts. She arrives really strong, really engaging. She's a great entrance. She's chaotic. It's like, what is she going to do? This 18-year-old girl, or this 18-year-old, a very immature 18-year-old, is one of the most unpredictable parts of the story. And it's like, well, there's immense harm she can do, but with her innocence, there's also immense harm that can be done to her. And I think it would have been great to maybe see that a bit more. As it is, her presence kind of fades as the novel goes on, and as I mentioned, I think she's pretty much gone by the final third of the book. Perhaps a later Elroy Leonard writing a similar novel might have maybe combined some of the characters or traits between them, and it would have made a really interesting component to the story, and real kind of first-rate villain, or someone who could have been redeemed. It's wide open, but I think there was something more that could have been done there, which would have been really interesting. Anyway, I look forward to reading more Elmore Leonard books. The ones I've read have been the two I have read I have enjoyed immensely, and hope to read more in the future. But I'm taking a break from him for now, and I'm reading a contemporary Western, so hopefully I'll have a video on that in the next week. It's very different from the two I've covered so far, but hopefully we'll have a video on that soon. Anyway, all the best, and thank you for watching. Bye.